You live long enough in public life, you start to recognize certain days. There are quiet days, there are chaotic days, there are days filled with noise that ultimately mean very little. And then there are the days that shift history, the kind of days people don't fully understand while they're living through them. February 28th, 2026 is one of those days. Most Americans woke up this morning, checked their phones, scrolled past a few headlines, maybe saw a post on social media. But what happened today is not just another headline. It is not just another foreign policy flare-up. It is not just another political fight in Washington. It may very well be the beginning of a new chapter in American history and in Middle Eastern history, one that carries consequences none of us can yet fully measure. Early this morning, President Donald Trump posted on Truth Social declaring that Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, had been killed in what he described as a joint U.S. Israeli military operation called Operation Epic Fury. He called Khamenei one of the most evil people in history. He framed it as justice not only for Americans, but for the Iranian people and for victims across the world. If true, this would mark one of the most consequential targeted killings in modern history. But before emotion takes over, before celebration or outrage, we have to slow down. Because when something this large happens, clarity matters more than adrenaline. I have seen moments like this before. I have watched how a single military decision can define a presidency, reshape alliances, and ripple outward for decades. The weight of military power is not theoretical. It is real. It rests on the shoulders of the commander-in-chief, and the consequences are carried by soldiers, families, and entire regions of the world. And here is the first reality we must confront. Iran has not officially confirmed that its supreme leader is dead. Iranian officials quickly pushed back, insisting that both the supreme leader and the president remain alive. That could be denial in the fog of war, it could be internal chaos, or it could mean the intelligence picture is still evolving. But what is not disputed is this. American and Israeli forces launched extensive strikes at approximately 1:15 Eastern Time. Iranian Revolutionary Guard command centers, missile launch facilities, air defense systems, and military airfields were targeted. The Pentagon confirmed that low-cost one-way attack drones were used in combat for the first time in this type of coordinated campaign. This was not symbolic. This was not a warning shot. This was a full-scale, high-intensity military operation. Now, here's the question every American should be asking. If, as President Trump stated last June, Iran's nuclear program had already been completely and totally obliterated, why are we here again 9 months later launching Operation Epic Fury? That is not a partisan question. It is a logical one. Iran's nuclear ambitions did not appear overnight. They have been building for decades. There were diplomatic efforts, sanctions, negotiations, pressure campaigns. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the Iran nuclear deal, was controversial. It was imperfect, but it placed inspectors on the ground and constraints on enrichment. When the United States withdrew from that deal in 2018 without a replacement framework, the strategic landscape shifted. Some argued maximum pressure would force Iran to capitulate. Others warned that removing diplomatic guardrails without alternatives would accelerate instability. Fast forward to this week. Negotiations between Washington and Tehran collapsed. There was no new agreement, no off-ramp. And now we have bombs falling. And bombs do not fall in isolation. Within hours of the strikes, Iran retaliated. Missile and drone attacks targeted U.S. military installations across the Middle East, the Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain, bases in Kuwait, Qatar, the UAE, and Jordan. At least 5 people are reported dead. Video shows projectiles striking near critical American naval infrastructure. This is how escalation works. The question is not whether retaliation was predictable. It was. The question is whether there is a plan for what comes next. Because the first 24 hours of a conflict are not the hardest part. It's the weeks after, the months after, the unintended consequences after. there is also a constitutional dimension here that cannot be ignored. The War Powers Resolution of 1973 exists because this country once learned, painfully, what happens when military force expands without congressional authorization. It allows the president to act in emergencies, but it requires notification within 48 hours and limits sustained engagement without congressional approval. Briefing members of Congress is not the same as securing authorization. Informing is not the same as consulting. Already, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are raising concerns. Some Democrats are preparing a war powers vote. Republican Congressman Thomas Massie has publicly opposed the war, saying it does not align with an America First doctrine. Senator Rand Paul has expressed skepticism. House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries asked a pointed question. If Iran's nuclear program was destroyed last year, what justifies a full-scale campaign now? These are not fringe voices. They are representatives elected to exercise oversight. When military action occurs without clear constitutional grounding, legitimacy erodes, and legitimacy matters. It is what sustains public support beyond the first surge of patriotic unity. But beyond Washington's debates lies something far more immediate: American service members in harm's way. Tonight, young men and women in uniform are stationed at bases now under threat. They did not decide this policy. They execute it. They deserve leadership that exhausts every alternative before exposing them to danger. There is another dimension, the international one. Russia has condemned the strikes as premeditated aggression. That may sound ironic given Moscow's own military record, but geopolitics is not about irony. It is about narrative, and the narrative battle has already begun. America's Gulf partners now find themselves absorbing retaliatory fire because of an operation they did not publicly authorize. Saudi Arabia condemned Iran's counterstrikes, but carefully avoided endorsing the original action outright. The United Nations Security Council has convened emergency discussions. Oil markets are reacting, which means American families may soon feel this conflict at the gas pump and in grocery stores. Power is not just about force, it is about coalition management. When allies feel consulted, they share burdens. When they feel sidelined, they recalculate. Now we must confront the most dangerous uncertainty of all: what happens inside Iran? If the supreme leader is truly dead, Iran faces a succession crisis unlike anything in recent memory. Power in Iran is not simple, it is layered. Clerical authority, the Revolutionary Guard, political factions, intelligence services remove the central figure and multiple centers of gravity compete. That could lead to fragmentation, it could lead to consolidation by hardliners, it could create a vacuum that militant groups exploit. History offers sobering lessons. When Saddam Hussein was removed from power in Iraq, the assumption in some quarters was that democracy would naturally fill the void. Instead came years of insurgency, sectarian conflict, and the eventual rise of ISIS. Regime decapitation without a detailed post-conflict stabilization plan can unleash forces far beyond the original objective. The second possibility is that the regime does not collapse, it hardens. Martyrdom narratives can unify factions that were previously divided. Nationalism can override internal dissent. Proxy networks across Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, and Syria could escalate dramatically. At that point, this is no longer a limited strike campaign. It becomes a regional confrontation with unpredictable duration. The third possibility is diplomacy, quiet, back-channel, unglamorous diplomacy. It doesn't trend on social media, it doesn't produce dramatic headlines, but it is the only path that consistently prevents wars from expanding. The administration has declared the operation a success, and tactically it may have achieved specific objectives, but strategy is not measured in destroyed targets alone. It is measured in what comes after. Can something more stable be built, or does destruction create new instability? There's also a moral dimension that must be acknowledged honestly. Iran's regime has been repressive. The protests in 2022, particularly the Woman Life Freedom movement, showed extraordinary courage from Iranian citizens demanding change. Young women risked imprisonment and worse to assert basic rights. They deserve self-determination, but self-determination is powerful precisely because it comes from within. When regime change appears externally imposed, it can undermine the legitimacy of domestic reform movements. Calling on a population to seize its government while foreign bombs are still falling may not empower moderates, it may strengthen hardliners. So here is where we stand tonight. American forces are on heightened alert. Iranian retaliation has already begun. Congress is debating its authority. Allies are recalibrating. Markets are reacting. And inside Iran, the internal balance of power may be shifting in ways we cannot yet see. Moments like this demand seriousness. They demand that Congress assert its constitutional role, not to weaken the country, but to strengthen it through legitimacy. They demand that the administration articulate a clear plan, not a slogan, not a social media post, but a strategy for stabilization, de-escalation, and defined objectives. They demand that citizens remain engaged, informed, and vigilant, because democracy is not passive. It requires oversight, it requires questioning, it requires accountability, especially when the stakes involve war and peace. We have navigated crises before, we have made mistakes before, but at our best, we learn from history rather than repeat it. The power of this country has never rested solely in the Oval Office. It rests in institutions, in constitutional balance, in public vigilance, in alliances built on trust. Tonight, American service members stand watch in volatile territory. Iranian civilians live with uncertainty about their leadership and their future. The world watches to see not just what America can destroy, but what it intends to build. The coming days will matter enormously. Restraint will matter, clarity will matter, legitimacy will matter. Because history rarely judges a nation solely by the force it unleashes, it judges by the wisdom with which that force is used, and by whether the aftermath leaves the world more stable or more fractured. This is one of those defining moments, and what happens next will tell us far more than what happened at 1:15 in the morning.